A market crash, it just feels inevitable, doesn't it? You see the headlines, you feel that anxiety, that fear of, well, losing everything. But what if we could trade all that fear for a clear, actionable plan? That's what we're going to do right now. Let's build that plan, and we're going to use solid data to do it.
And this quote, man, it's famous for a reason, right? We all like to think we're going to be these calm, rational investors. But when the market starts to nosedive, that punch to the mouth, it's a real shock. And just like that, poof, all those careful plans can go right out the window.
But honestly, a punch to the mouth doesn't even feel like the right metaphor. A real market crash, it's more like a kidney punch, It's not that sharp, quick pain. It's this deep, gnawing ache that just lasts for days, weeks, maybe even months. And all that time, it's making you second-guess every single financial decision you've ever made.
And that pain, it leads to one thing, one big instinctive reaction: panic selling. It's that gut feeling to just stop the bleeding, right? To just sell it all. But here's the thing, that's not a strategy. It's a pure reaction, totally driven by fear. And it is almost always the wrong thing to do. So our main goal here is to build a solid defense against that very impulse.
All right, so to see exactly how this all plays out in the real world, we don't even have to look that far back. Let's take a look at the tariff panic of 2025. It is a perfect case study of just how fast fear can grab the wheel and, what the consequences really are.
Okay, so here's the play-by-play. It starts in February, new tariffs get announced, and the market gets a little shaky. Then March rolls around, the talk gets tougher, and that slide starts to pick up speed. By April, you've got this constant barrage of negative headlines, and boom, you see that classic herd mentality kick in. People are selling just because everyone else is selling. And before you know it, the market's down a solid 10, even 15%.
The panic was everywhere. You had seasoned pros on TV saying, no, this time is different. The old rules don't apply. It was a total, as Professor G would say, take it easy, turbo moment. And that's the thing, right? When even the experts are mashing the panic button, you know the fear is legit.
And this just perfectly lays out the core problem. The reaction for so many people was to sell everything in April. They thought they were being smart, getting out before it got worse. But the result? Well, they turned what was just a temporary paper loss into a very permanent, very real loss. And in doing so, they totally missed what was coming next. Because what happened next was a huge rebound. And get this, for anyone who just did nothing, who just held on tight through that scary dip in April, they finished the year up 18%. 18! They took the kidney punch, they weathered the storm, and they came out way ahead.
And look, that story from 2025, that's not some one-off fluke. It's actually pretty much the historical norm. So let's pivot now from the emotional story to the hard data, because honestly, solid numbers are the absolute best antidote to emotional panic.
So let's look at this number. After a typical 10% market correction, the average return for the S&P 500 1 year later is positive 5.2%. Now think about that. That's a powerful reason to just stay calm. It shows that after one of those drops that feels so bad, the market doesn't just tend to recover, it's usually in positive territory within a year. It's not the exception, it's pretty much the rule. Okay, but it gets even crazier. What happens after a really deep decline? One of those gut-wrenching over 15% drops that has everyone panicking. The average return 1 year later is a staggering 47%. Just let that sink in. The times of maximum fear have historically been followed by the absolute biggest rebounds. It's totally counterintuitive, but the data is right there.
Now, it's also really important to know what kind of downturn we're dealing with, because it helps set expectations. A correction, that's a 10 to 20% drop, that usually blows over in just a few months. But a true bear market, that's a drop of more than 20%, that's a different beast. Historically, it takes around 19 months just to hit the bottom, and even longer to fully recover. Knowing this difference is so key so you don't panic if things don't bounce back right away.
Okay, so we've established that panic is the enemy. And that, historically, time is on our side. So when the next crash does hit, you really only have 3 options. Think of this as your simple decision-making toolkit. It boils down to this. You can sell, you can hold, or you can buy. That's it. One is the panic move, one is the patient path, and one is the opportunistic play. And figuring out which one is right for you isn't just some classroom exercise, it's the absolute core of your plan. All right, let's talk about option 1, selling. This is the one where that little voice in your head starts whispering, hey, just get out now, we'll save our money, and then we'll jump back in at the absolute bottom. Sounds great, right? But here is the reality. To pull that off, you have to be right not once, but twice. You have to perfectly time when to sell and perfectly time when to buy back in. Almost nobody, and I mean nobody, can do that consistently. You usually just end up selling low and buying high. Which brings us to option 2, which is simply to hold. You know, there was this famous study that looked for the best performing brokerage accounts over a long time. And you know who the winners were? They fell into 2 groups. People who had completely forgotten they even had the account, and people who were dead. The lesson here is pretty clear, right? Sometimes the absolute best move is to just not meddle at all. And that leaves us with option 3, buying the dip. Now, this is the really proactive, opportunistic strategy. But, and this is super important, this is not about acting on a gut feeling. It is a preset, written down plan. For example, you decide beforehand, okay, if the market drops 10%, I'm going to invest this much more than my usual amount. If it drops 15%, I'm deploying my reserve cash. The absolute requirement here, though, is you have to have a long-term mindset and the guts to watch your portfolio maybe go down even more before it turns around. Okay, so there you have it. Those are your 3 options. Now we get to the most important part of this whole thing, building your proactive plan. The entire point is to decide what you are going to do long before you ever get that punch in the mouth. That way, when it happens, you're just executing a strategy, not reacting out of fear.
And I gotta be crystal clear about this. There is no one-size-fits-all plan here. Your plan has to be built for your life, for your goals, for your timeline. I mean, an aggressive buy-the-dip strategy might be absolutely perfect for a 25-year-old, right? But for someone who's 65 and about to retire, that could be a terrible idea. For them, it's all about safety.
So if you're in that camp, if your priority is safety, here's a fantastic, super practical rule of thumb. Try to keep about 3 years of your living expenses in cash. Why 3 years? Well, because, as we just saw, the really bad bear markets can take a while to recover from. That cash buffer, that's your lifeline. It means you can pay your bills without having to sell your investments when they're at their lowest point, giving them the time they need to recover.
So here's the bottom line. The next crash isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You've seen the history, you've seen the data, you know your 3 options. The only thing left is for you to decide. So I'll leave you with this. What's your plan? Because the one thing we know for sure is that it's coming. The only question is, will you be ready?